The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. That was a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche, a well-renowned philosopher. But what in the world does that have to do with anime? Well, you see, why many people tend to look down on anime as something just for kids, anyone who's watched much can tell you that's simply not true. And while there are shows for kids, there are many that dive into topics that are suited for more mature audiences. Now, let me explain how a no-good, stupid, run-of-the-mill rom-com can teach us about the intricacies of life. Oregairu is a show that took me maybe 3 attempts to get interested in watching. It just felt like the show lacked any substance. That being said, once I got into the latter half of the series, I completely changed my mind. That show was so damn packed with interesting concepts that I was practically forced to buy the light novel and see what I could find. Wataru Watari has made an excellent work with great philosophical value, and wait, that's why all the characters are named like that. Yukino Yukinoshita, Yui Yuigahama, Saki Kawasaki, Shizuka Hirosuka, and the author Wataru Watari. Anyways. Simply watching the show and not giving it too much thought, you can come out with a good rom-com that might hit you in the feels. But whether you've watched it or not, you probably missed just how deep this simple show can be. If you haven't watched the show, don't worry too much. There won't be any spoilers. What we'll be doing is using it as a way to further understand the themes that can be found within it. If you've seen it or not, you'll be able to learn something new and visit the series with a different perspective. Oregairu is a show about being genuine, suffering through life, codependence, and how we can become better people. Oregairu wants you to come out with something meaningful. Before I explain any further, let me give a rundown to anyone who hasn't seen the show. If you've seen it already, you can skip to this time on the screen to get to the next part, or stick around and get a refresher. Oregairu starts with an essay written by the main character Hikigaya. The paper shows Hikigaya's thought process, which can be summed up in the first line he wrote. Youth is a lie. It's nothing but evil. Hikigaya, from the start, is a cynical realist. He reflects on the life he's been dealt and conforms to it rather than seeking anything different. After reading the paper, his teacher, Ms. Hirosuka, forces him to join the service club. The service club, as described by the only member, is designed to help people learn to solve their own problem. It's about teaching a man to fish rather than giving him a fish, for he'll be able to feed himself for life. Off the bat, the only club member, Yukinoshita, seems to hate Hikigaya and acts quite coldly towards him. After a few days of nothing but sitting in silence reading, the club gets its first request. This request comes from the last of the 3 main characters, Yuigahama, who joins the club shortly after her request is met. During season 1, each of the members slowly get closer to each other and start to become something you could call friends. For the most part, the first season is your run-of-the-mill typical rom-com. The second season is where we start to get things moving. While going on about one of their requests, Hikigaya pulls what I'm going to have to refer to as a Hikigaya move. You see, we quickly start to realize that Hikigaya's way of solving problems is by sacrificing himself socially, taking the blame, so to speak. But now that the 3 of them have gotten closer, we get to the main substance of season 2. The main point of this season is the idea of forming a genuine relationship. They learn this is what they want, but none of them know how to attain it. Finally, the 3rd season brings forth the topics of responsibility and codependence. These end up being a huge part of what shapes the characters and overall story. Now that I've covered the need to know, let's get into the bushes and the weeds. What does it mean to be genuine? Or perhaps a better word that psychologists tend to use in this context, what does it mean to be authentic? Throughout Oregairu, we see the struggle of 3 people to be able to form what they deem to be a genuine relationship. But why can't they? What gets in the way? And how would they even be able to determine what's authentic? Something I noticed during my research was something that causes many relationships to fall apart and be non-genuine. Each member of the main group put up walls to keep themselves safe. Yukinoshita's wall she hides behind is a persona of sorts. She has to conform so she can uphold her family name and not go against the wishes of her mother. Because of this, Yukino has difficulty coming out about what she truly wants to do with her future. Yuigahama's wall is her other friend group. Unlike the others, she has friends, and she doesn't want to stop hanging out with them. Because of this, she chooses to act in a way that is not her genuine self. She does this so she can fit in with her old friends. This makes it hard for her to fully embrace her newer friends with whom she can be herself around. And Hikigaya hides behind what the light novel calls second-year head swell. This second-year head swell is an affliction of those who read or listen to people who they deem to be extremely intelligent about the world. They take what people have said, agree with it, then parrot it without fully understanding if they themselves believe it. Now, there's nothing wrong with learning from others, nor is there anything wrong to agree with what another believes. The problem lies in that Hikigaya never really questions what he reads. He never stops to think about if it actually makes sense, or if he can truly say he believes in it. Something that at first may seem completely reasonable could end up being against whom you really are. In reality, we tend to be ignorant of who we truly are and who we could be. It's often foolish of us to assume that the views of another, no matter how sound they might seem to be, align with whom we are and who we truly could be, if authentic. This is why we shouldn't form walls that don't reflect who we are. Being authentic means living your life as who you are rather than being an imitation of someone else. You only have the chance to live once, and you should give yourself the chance to do that as who you could be, not wishing you were someone else. Being authentic is how you grow and how you become who you desire to be, even if you don't yet know what you desire or why you desire it. If that doesn't make sense, let me explain in clearer terms. Do not rob yourself. Think about yourself a couple of years ago, or hell, 5 to 10 years ago. Is that person the same as the person who's watching this now? For me, it sure ain't. Now, does the you of the past have any idea what the you of now needs or wants? No. So, how do you know that the you of today knows what the you of tomorrow wants? This is the idea of not robbing yourself. Don't do something now that will close you off from being who you could be later. You don't know what you're capable of. Don't hurt yourself, don't trick yourself, and make an effort to be authentic. Here's how we can do that. Nietzsche, the philosopher I mentioned before, studied the concept of authenticity/genuinity. Nietzsche believed that freedom is the core of the human experience, and as such, one should strive to be authentic so one can live a meaningful and free life. Nietzsche's defined authenticity as how closely one's actions reflected their beliefs and desires, and that one's actions should not be defined by any sort of social norms or conformity. This mirrors themes found throughout Oregairu, and it's of interesting note considering just how deep social norms and cultural conformity runs throughout Japan. Nietzsche, however, never gives a clear and concise explanation of how to know if you're authentic. So let me explain 3 concepts I believe can serve to help us to know, seeing as it can be pretty damn hard to know if we're telling the truth. 1. If you say something and have an odd feeling, perhaps it's because it's wrong. A way I keep myself in check is to think about what I say after I say it. I know that sounds kind of odd. Generally, you're supposed to think about what you say before you say it, but if we reflect on things we say, we can notice when our actions don't align with our beliefs. The feeling I often get when I say something inauthentic to myself is that of an emptiness in my mid-region. Sort of like there's something missing, or perhaps something creeping around me. It's similar to the feeling of anxiety, but not quite the same. 2. An easy way to know when you're acting against yourself is when you say something you know is wrong, or something you don't know is correct. Don't lie to people about who you are. It only leads to the formation of non-genuine relationships. But if you slip up, don't be too hard on yourself. Everyone has gone against themselves at least once for the sake of their good name. 3. Assuming you aren't authentic. The fake you that you currently are could be a part of what you need to be authentic. As such, you should try to learn who you could be through who you currently are. While these might not be extremely clear, if we reflect upon them, we may come to a better understanding. Oregairu's importance comes from its explanation as to why we should be genuine/authentic and why it matters. Everyone wishes to have genuine relationships. Even Hikigaya, who's solitary and confined, starts to be himself around the main cast. He realizes just how vital these relationships are. Luckily, it's not too hard to know when a relationship is genuine. If you have real friends, they'll want to celebrate your successes and won't overshadow your failures. When you have true friends, if something bad happens to you, they'll provide support. A main problem faced in the show are those Hikigaya moves I mentioned earlier. When Yukinoshita and Yuigahama get closer to Hikigaya, they hate to see him sacrifice himself to solve the problems of others. Yukino and Yui both wanted the best for Hikigaya, even when he didn't want the best for himself. It was through his self-sacrifice that they met turmoil in their friendship. It wasn't until Hikigaya finally realized he wanted something genuine that he started to try to solve problems in a way that wouldn't lead to his downfall. In the final season, we heavily deal with the concept of codependence. Yukinoshida's sister, Haruno, explains that the relationship the three main characters have is an unhealthy one based upon dependence. She believes that they'd fall apart without each other and that they need to learn to deal with their problems on their own. In the beginning, Hikigaya takes this to heart, and throughout the last season he tries to figure out what exactly this means. It's not until much later that his teacher, Mitsuhirosuka, explains that the relationship he has is too complicated to sum down to only one word. Codependence is a tricky subject. At what point does getting help from someone turn into a dependence? And while a full-blown dependence is not a good thing, don't we need others to help us through life? One of the most powerful tools you can have at your disposal is someone to help you, especially if and when you don't realize you need help. Everyone has a burden to bear. Life itself is burdensome. In many ways, it can feel like every day is a challenge. The hurdles we need to jump through feel endless and always getting taller. Simply being alive comes with some sort of suffering. This is the burden of being, the challenge of simply living in a world we know nothing about. But if we can accept the idea that life is fraught with suffering, then we can work to overcome that suffering. The ways in which we do that are with the actions we take and the relationships we form. What might at first seem like codependence could be something helping us to bear that burden. Despite this innate burden, we can help each other to bear our weight. We can learn from others' failures and they can learn from ours. We can provide some level of support as well as receive support when we have genuine relationships. Imagine the burden of life is a weight above your head. Each person has to carry at least the same weight, though sometimes more. Because some of that weight is shared among all of us, it is possible to have someone help you to bear that load, making it easier to carry. This is what Oregairu is at its core. It's about people learning, struggling, and not understanding life. Yet when they're together, they manage to take on their challenges with more ease. Oregairu is a show about helping someone bear their burden. The last theme, responsibility, ties everything together. What's the point of taking on responsibility and bearing a burden anyways? Living a meaningful life, that's why. One of the last things to happen in the show is Hikigaya's acceptance of responsibility. He realizes what he could have, knows that he doesn't want to live without it, and chooses to take on the responsibility and bear the burdens of that responsibility so he can live a life of meaning. He wants to live a meaningful life, so he shoulders his burdens and the burdens of the one he chooses to date. And furthermore, the one he chooses to date does the same for him. This is how Oregairu shows us how to find meaning. This is what a random, stupid, run-of-the-mill rom-com can tell us about life. We can overcome our adversity and become who we genuinely are by accepting responsibility and bearing our burdens. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or your own theories, comment below and start a conversation. If you learned something new, consider liking this video, and if you want to see more content like this, please subscribe.